Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I'm wearing the gear. I ate my Thanksgiving meal in the postgame while I watched Bradley Bozeman. I was getting right to the broccoli and the leftover stuffing with John Harbaugh. Yes, it was day 5 or day 6 of leftovers with my Thanksgiving, but I did not have the sweet potato crumble. I waited to the segment with Luke Jones here because we're promoting Dark all month long, and the big box of fun, the 8-pack that can come to you. One click, you save $15.70. It still says so on the AM radio dial. And for just over $40, you get 8 of these delivered. Eggnog, wake and bake, honey graham, caramel crunch, peanut butter crunch, whatever you want, it's all there. And they wanted to let me know, Luke, just so you know, because you're about to become Uncle Luke, so that when the Taharka bus comes, that this is not the truck that they deliver the ice cream in. This is the scoop truck. This is not the delivery truck. It is made differently, has different a coldness about it in the little window. But either way, they are playing good music on the Taharka bus. So my wife is coming in to relieve me from my ice cream. I haven't even had a bite of it. The Ravens lost in Pittsburgh. It was like a backup game. Luke, I thought it was going to stink. I thought they were going to lose like 48-6. And as it turns out, it was a gallant effort by the men in purple, was it not?
It was. And look, I said all week, we've talked about this. Gosh, I feel like we've been breaking down this game and the outbreak and the prospects of winning or most likely losing. I feel like it's been 3 weeks we've been talking about this, but
I wouldn't have bet on it.
If you're going to look at it strictly from a football standpoint, I think you take some encouragement from it from the standpoint of considering everything that happened. So many questions not related to football and related to safety and the outbreak and not just the virus-related safety, but also just player safety and health, having not practiced for over a week, and then you're asked to do a couple walkthroughs and fly to Pittsburgh and try to play a game with 15, 20 players down, however many it was, however you want to look at it.
Dude, when the score was 12-7, I thought to myself, oh, my God. They're playing without 20 guys. Is the level of the bench, I mean, is really number 71 and number 43 really not all that different? Maybe not. I don't know. But from an execution standpoint, and those guys wanted to play, the guys that were out there meant a lot to them, obviously. I mean, it meant a lot to RG3. I felt his being crushed in the postgame about his hamstring. I mean, it was a playoff differentiator kind of game that I wish kind of were 48-6 as I sit here and eat my sweet potato crumble. But I'll tell you what, man, that play at the goal line, at the end of the first half, that might be the difference in them going to the playoffs or not. I mean, like that changed the game, man.
Yeah, well, I would also say it's probably a lousy play call coming out of a timeout too.
Terrible.
Look, we can harp on the officiating. The Steelers did exactly what you're coached to do in that situation. So you can be ticked off at them, but the Ravens would do the same exact thing if it was flipped. Now, you can talk about the officiating and not blowing it dead after a certain amount of time where you just say, hey, what's going on? But, that's just a bad sequence from a coaching standpoint. And, hey, Luke Wilson had a chance to make the catch. And that's the difference between Mark Andrews or Nick Boyle being the one there.
Or Hayden Hurst, throw him in there.
Yeah, throw him in there too if you want. And the practice squad. A guy that's a veteran tight end, played in Seattle a number of years, but was always a blocking tight end. Go look at his numbers. He didn't do much in that way. But that aside, when you're looking at this from a big picture standpoint, looking at it through a football lens, I think we had plenty of questions about where this team would be mentally, in addition to the physical challenges, the preparation challenges, but just we asked a lot about how players felt about how this was handled. Certainly guys had questions about why the building was open last Monday and Tuesday when it was just Dobbins and Ingram and Brandon Williams as a close contact. And then they say, we're going to open up the building Monday afternoon. So players had questions. They had questions throughout the week. We know it's been reported. It's no secret now the last day or two that players, especially some veterans, expressed some concerns about playing Tuesday night. They moved the game to Wednesday. So you're really wondering from a football standpoint, are they just going to show up and lay down I mean, is this going to be a case where they're just not in it whatsoever, mentally or physically? And to your point, the scenario where you lose 48-3.
Well, and the building's not going to bring anything. You're
Oh,
not going
sure,
to come
no
out and get
question.
booed or cheered. I mean, when the blimp went over the stadium and it's empty and I'm hearing the Sunday Night Football and I'm watching the sun come in the window, I'm like, man, this is like really, really weird. Really
Totally weird. Totally weird. But the fact that they were able to compete, albeit they were so shorthanded. I mean, we saw that. Tristan Colon Castillo was their starting center. And look, he's someone that they promoted from the practice squad to the 53-man roster some weeks back because some other teams are sniffing around on him. He's clearly someone they like, but I don't think starting against the Pittsburgh Steelers for his first ever NFL snaps in a game of this magnitude. And to your point, considering where they are now in the playoff race, AFC North is out of the question. It was before this game. Even if they won this game, they weren't going to catch the Steelers. But all of those factors in, all the acknowledgement of how ugly this was. And I mean, Pittsburgh played a very poor game too. I think Mike Tomlin used the term, it was junior varsity in all three phases from his perspective on how they played. So it was a slog. It was ugly. It was a slop fest, but the Ravens had a chance. And you know me, Nestor, I am not a warm and fuzzy moral victory kind of guy, but when you just look at the reality of this and you look at the number of players they were missing, and the fact that, not that they just lost by a touchdown and, they had some semblance of a chance at the end, but they did battle. To me, that does bode well from a mental standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, moving forward now. We've talked about this a lot. Their last 5 games, they play one team with a winning record, the Cleveland Browns, who at 8-3, I'm not buying that they're a true 8-3 team. I give them credit, but that's not a team you're scared of going to Cleveland on a Monday night trying to play. So you're 6-5. You're hoping, and John Harbaugh and some others indicated that most players, it sounds like they're doing well overall as far as guys that are sick. Doesn't sound like there's any worst case scenarios. You pray for the health of all involved, obviously, and that goes so far beyond football. But if you get your guys back here in the coming days, you're going up against a Cowboys team that is terrible. You go again.
The team we saw on Wednesday afternoon can beat the Cowboys.
Yeah, right. I mean, if they're in a scenario, and there will be a few guys that they're not going to have back for that game. If you kind of look at and I'm really leery to just say, okay, 10 days and guys are back. We know that that's the minimum. We know that that's not necessarily going to be the case for everyone because we're talking about an illness here that guys are recovering from. But the final 5 opponents have a combined 18-36-1 record. Now, I'll even say with one loss at Cleveland, let's just say that for a worst case scenario, 4-1 gets them to 10-6 with an extra spot in the AFC. That's probably getting it done.
Probably getting them back to Pittsburgh in a couple of weeks.
maybe, who knows, or going to Kansas City, which would also be very interesting. But my point is, it's still sitting right there from a football standpoint when you look at their final 5 opponents. And if this is a team that's going to get off the mat and regroup, and I mean, we saw the defense play very well. I give those guys a lot of credit. Some bending, but they played their butts off inside the red zone and even those goal-to-go situations. So we've seen that all year from the defense. They've had some hiccups here and there, but overall, they've played at a playoff championship caliber level. The question is going to be this offense. I don't know really what you take away from this team.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, my wife just brought me in some caramel apple crisp, and I thought, I'm just going to wind Luke up and sit here and eat some ice cream and have you break down what it looked like with, we couldn't even – I needed a scorecard at various points, especially when you sent out the inactives and the actives and, Coons Ford. I'm looking down, and I'm like, Dennis doesn't know who these guys are. We're going to have to figure this out on Thursday between 3 and 5. Yeah. But before, my wife brought me in the caramel apple crisp. I want to, promote this because we haven't asked our audience to do much, lately. And we've merged WNST with Baltimore Positive. We've got this great relationship with our friends at the Hark. I love the ice cream. Your mother eats the ice cream, Luke. I mean, so everybody loves the ice cream. You can get it delivered for $15.70 off. You get the box. It's an 8-pack. You got kids. Your kids can meet them at the door. They send a text. The whole story's out at Baltimore Positive. I've had Vinny on. I had Mike on this week. I had Coffee on last week. We were talking about all these guys have worked at Taharka for a long, long time, and they're doing a really, really cool thing. There's a big announcement next week about how they're going to move forward in 2021, and they're delivering ice cream. So they got the eggnog, the peppermint bark, but this is a seasonal. Luke, this is apple butter ice cream with oat streusel and a salted caramel swirl. It's barely, they barely have enough label to fit it all on here. So I just want to make you aware that tell mom, love your mom, you know what I mean? But tell her she can move beyond vanilla bean. The vanilla's great, but she can spice it up here, and tell her that she needs to order. Like if you order right now, you get the caramel apple crisp. The eggnog's not available till next week because they got to make it this week. Okay. So if you get the delivery next week, you do it that way. But, I just want everybody to know. And now you can carry on with football conversation about a team that hopefully we don't see that team again against Dallas, and certainly not 2 weeks ago from now against Cleveland, right?
Yeah, no question about it. And to your point, I mean, maybe this team beats the Dallas Cowboys, but you're really shorthanded here. And that's why I do give them a lot of credit. It's a loss. And look, there's no moral victories in the NFL, but this isn't a typical NFL scenario where, all right, you're missing your quarterback. That happens. If you had said at the beginning of the year Lamar Jackson misses a game, I'm not batting an eyelash. That happens. Lots of quarterbacks around this league miss a game or two. Especially one who runs a lot like Lamar Jackson. But it's not just him. It's the linemen they were missing on both sides of the ball. It's your all-pro tight end. I mean, it's your emerging running back of the future who looked so good the last couple of weeks and really looking like he was going to seize control of the job, and J.K. Dobbins. And
there really was no ability to pass protect at all, right? That could have been all day, every day. And RG3 might have gotten sacked a dozen times had he not been as mobile. And that's part of this thing too, right? Like that there was no practice, no ability.
Sure.
If you saw this a little bit more often, maybe you could work with it to some degree. But the offensive line was just not mano-a-mano. A lot of guys don't match up well with TJ Watt, right? Like mano-a-mano, and I saw Bud Dupree went down. A lot of guys, a lot of lines have not matched up and schemed up well against this Pittsburgh defense. They're 11-0. They're pretty good, right? I mean, despite how they looked on Wednesday, they're pretty good.
Yeah, and Robert Griffin III would be the first to tell you he didn't play well either. He did some nice things with his legs, and of course then he pulls the hamstring, and that really limited what he was able to do. And you saw it; he was limping at a few occasions, but times where the ball needed to come out quickly and was designed to come out quickly, it didn't happen. So, how much of that is him? How much of that is the offensive line? How much of that is a lack of preparation? And this brings us back to, when you and I were fighting about this earlier in the week, as much as debating the merits of playing without all these guys, I looked at it much more on the flip side of saying, all right, it's one thing not to have Lamar Jackson and company, but what about the guys that actually are playing where they don't get to practice for an entire week? I mean, the building is shuttered, so you're even just scrambling, just being able to work out and stay in shape from a conditioning
And they're not
standpoint.
Really football players in that way where they go out and pound. They haven't pounded for 10 weeks the way the rest of the guys have woken up sore on Monday. These guys some of them have just watched the game on TV for the most part, right?
Well, and let's take this a step further. And I pointed this out during the game, not even as a major negative, as kind of something that was neat for some of these rookies coming off of the practice squad, and even like an Aaron Adoye who's been on their practice squad a couple years now. Some of these rookies that were elevated from the practice squad on Wednesday, Nestor, they didn't even have a preseason game to play in the summer. So you're talking about guys who were in a practice setting from the moment they stepped foot in the Ravens facility in late July when they started.
And now it's go block TJ Watt.
And suddenly, yeah, you're going into Pittsburgh and this strange Wednesday environment, and you had walkthroughs the last couple of days, and you did virtual work all week. I mean, it's all very odd. Look, I'm not surprised that they lost. Full disclosure, even before the outbreak started, I was probably picking the Ravens to lose on Thursday night with Lamar Jackson and company. It's just kind of where I felt about where this football team was at this standpoint, and some of the health issues they had, not related to the virus, Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, et cetera, and the offensive line as far as how they've been ravaged by injuries. So, they were behind the eight ball. I mean, you can talk. I say this to you all the time, and we've said it a lot over the years when the injuries really pile up. Next man up sounds great until you get to a point where it's empty words that are on a T-shirt and you just don't have players. You don't have the horses to do it. And that's where this team was on Wednesday. So, the takeaway is they got through it. You hope Jimmy Smith with the groin injury isn't, something that keeps him out long. RG3, of course, with the hamstring, but if Lamar Jackson's not playing, this team isn't going anywhere and is done anyway. So, your assumption is you get him back. If he's recovered after 10 days, he's able to play against the Cowboys, and then you move forward. But, it's just, it was a lousy situation for these guys to be in. And as I said to you, as much as we've had disagreements on different elements of this whole argument as far as playing within the midst of a pandemic, I keep coming back to when it became apparent at the end of last week that they weren't going to be able to play on Sunday. That's when you got into a territory where, to me, not even talking about the guys who tested positive that weren't playing, this came down to the players who were eligible to play and not having the means to even be able to adequately prepare for this game whatsoever. I mean, that's where I really, take some major issue with why we're why, when I say we're, the league is just hell-bent on not having a week 18. And that's where, you get to a point when it was clear that wasn't going to happen. If you're the Ravens, you get through it. And they competed their butts off. They weren't good enough. They weren't talented enough, but they still made a game of it. And that's where I think you do take some comfort, not comfort, some encouragement moving forward that, that this wasn't something that necessarily fractured the locker room and guys started going into business with themselves and guys aren't trusting the organization. And look, John Harbaugh said it when he was asked. No one batted 1,000 in handling this thing. And I think that's obvious when you look at the timeline going back to last Monday morning. But the fact that
I want to get more into that. Like,
we will.
That's a whole thing unto itself, protocol and them running from this and who did what and the real cost. When I ask one question, only the second question I've asked all year, I asked RG3, and he went on a good little 2-minute movement about family and family members testing positive, and nobody's talking about that and all that.
Sure.
But from a football perspective, the game's over now, right? And now it's like, all right, day short on Dallas, day short on Cleveland. Who's going to be back? Can we win these 2 games and get ourselves to 8-5? I mean, and all along, as Harbaugh's sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, he only wants football questions, blah, 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 blah. And, this is the time when you make the big bucks and you got leadership, and if there were protocol breakdowns, you probably owe it to everybody to explain why the hell you were playing on Wednesday afternoon, right? I mean, that's really the reason, right? Because the commissioner has basically said, well, if you follow the rules, you would have had your whole team. And we think our rules are good, and we think our protocols are good, and we think you probably broke the rules. And again, it goes back to the medicine part of it. And then there's the team that goes out, and honestly, it really is incredible. As I said to you, if the 75th guy is as good as the 38th guy, and that's really what we're talking about here, and it doesn't affect the game so much that an undefeated team can't play a team with 20 guys missing, including 7 Pro Bowl, the whole deal, right? And the game could be 12-7. That's all the more reason for Goodell to say, see, take your medicine. You know what I mean? Like, the show goes on. The band will play, the tickets will be sold, the lights will come on, and the uniforms will be filled with warm bodies. And next man up, and the 4th string quarterback gets a paycheck, and all of that. So this is a chance for our young talent to surface and get an opportunity. And I mean, I hear, and then Goodell stands up in the middle of all of it. Ugh, God, it makes me itch. Yeah. But what really is incredible is the level of the athletes go out and the gladiators perform. And in the aftermath of the game, we're like, oh, hell, man. The Ravens would have maybe thrown the ball at the goal line when they didn't have any timeouts. Maybe they would have won the game.
Yeah, and the point I was trying to make as far as moving forward, when you're going into, coming out of a situation like this, and RG3 and some others acknowledged having questions about how this was handled at the league standpoint. You didn't hear too many players talk about the organization directly, but I'm sure that can be implied, and certainly no one mentioned Steve Saunders by name, but I'm sure everyone's thinking that. But the fact that they went out and did compete and did play to the best of their ability, given the circumstances, given the talent that was missing from the field, that to me bodes well for this team over the final month of the season from a football standpoint, because this would have been a very easy situation where guys check out and guys start going into business for themselves, and they just say, well, this organization doesn't care about me, so why am I going to go out
I'll be
there
honest
and
with you, man.
play
Marcus
hard?
Peters is one of those guys, been a Wildcat guy, third organization, all deal. And I don't think Ngakoue has that rep. Like guys that have been moving around, and the Ravens have, they brought in Earl Thomas. They bring guys in. Calais Campbell, who's a great, man of the year and all that. Steve Smith, same thing. They bring guys in.
Sure.
And they feel like and this is the hardball, sort of the arrogance of all of it. It's my system and it's going to work. And, we build the culture and the player will come in and attach to that. But there's been some individual look and walk the last couple of weeks in a way that maybe we didn't see so much when the team had a little bit more captainship around, a little bit more Ray Lewis on this side and Ed Reed over here and John Ogden over there and remnants of Suggs and other, people that the Weddles, the good guys they brought in. They're in search of that, right? And I think you and I maybe talked about who didn't want to come out to the podium after they got their ass kicked in the rain. And, where's Marlon Humphrey hiding? And now Ronnie Stanley's not there to be there anymore. Who's going to step up? My wife asked me that during the game on Wednesday. She's like, who's going to come to the podium after this? I said, Bradley Bozeman. And I'll be damned if he wasn't the first guy to step up and go all, gee, shucks, golly, willikers. I played at Bama and everything Nick told me I'm going to say now. And, RG3 with, that's a trap question. Like all of that goes into these hostage videos with the Zoom. At some point, there were a lot of broken rules here and probably a lot of emotions about wives and families and who got me sick and my wife's pissed she got sick because our trainer and, just all of that can really screw a team up, right? And I think that's what we're getting at, that they went out and they balled on Wednesday as a unit, right? And that's probably going to serve them well for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and look, I want to make clear that when I'm complimenting how they went out and tried and played and the effort they put forth, that doesn't guarantee they're going to win the next 5 games and they're going on a magic carpet ride kind of run to Tampa and winning the Super Bowl or wherever, if they bubble it or, whatever they do with the playoffs.
Wherever a 6-5 team that just went through the plagues going, right? Exactly.
But we talked about this after the Tennessee game. We talked about this after the New England game. It's really easy for everyone to be on the same page when you're 14-2. Everyone's feeling great. Everyone has their role. Even the guys that are young and backups, they're thinking, wow, I'm associated with – Nestor, think about the history of this franchise, the role defensive players who've gotten big contracts elsewhere just because they were attached to Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and Terrell Suggs over the years, Haloti Ngata. So, but our question was, what happens when you start losing? And let's face it, this team's in it now. Earlier in the season, we were talking about how from the eyeball test standpoint, it wasn't looking as good as it did last year, but they were still 5-1 at the bye.
They're still going to win 12 or 13, right? Like literally, right?
Yeah. But we also talked about it at that point. We said, hey, 5-1, the 2000 Ravens through 6 games they were in the midst of 5 straight games without a touchdown and losing 3 in a row and falling to 5-4 and benching your starting quarterback and Trent Dilfer's coming in and you lose to the Steelers. I think it was 9-6 or whatever it was. No one thought. Everyone left that team for dead at that point, especially a team at that point that had never had a winning season, let alone made the playoffs. 2012, we talked about the fact that team started 9-2, but again, similar to what we talked about the first 6 weeks this year. You look at that 9-2, there were some games they barely skirted by in Kansas City. They barely beat the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys missed a field goal at the gun in that game. There was the Ray Rice San Diego, Ray Rice up the middle.
Miracle.
There was just so much that you looked to. But you looked at that and you said, okay, they're 9-2. Are they the elite championship caliber 9-2, or is the other shoe going to drop? They lost 4 out of 5 then to close the regular season. They lose 3 in a row. So we kind of talked about, is this team going to have something along those lines? Well, they're in it. And the outbreak goes so far beyond football, but they've lost 4 out of 5 and they're at 6-5 right now. And they're on the outside looking in at this point. But as I said, you get your guys back, you take a look, you take some satisfaction. Again, I want to be careful on moral victories or that this means anything. all that much in the big picture, but it was a nice sign to see guys compete the way they did. Guys held it together the way they did. You didn't have guys that, jaked it from an effort standpoint when it would have been easy to do that because, hey, they're trying not to get hurt out there, right? After they didn't get to practice all week. So to me, if I'm John Harbaugh and the coaching staff, I do take some heart in seeing that. And I'm hoping with that, and obviously getting a heck of a lot of guys back over the coming days, and fingers crossed that guys are recovering and feeling good and eventually getting back on the field. And now you go from a Wednesday game to a Tuesday game, which is really strange, but you hope you're going to be able to log some practice time, and it feels maybe not on the normal days, but at least there's some normalcy to it. And you go out there, you play the Cowboys, a team you should beat, and then after that, Cleveland, you try to get on a roll here. And you look at what the rest of the schedule is. I mean, you're talking about Jacksonville, the Giants, and Cincinnati, and even the Bengals now with Joe Burrow being out. That they're not even as impressive on paper as they might have looked, considering their record's 2-8-1 as it is. So, it's sitting right there for them. That's why I said over and over with this game that I never thought this was a must-win game, for the very simple reason they weren't going to catch Pittsburgh at this point anyway. I mean, if they somehow beat them, they're still down 3 games with 5 to play. And the Steelers don't have a murderer's row. They have a tougher schedule than the Ravens, but they're not exactly playing juggernauts the last 5 weeks either, every single week. So they were never going to catch the Steelers. Yeah, you'd love to win this game. You'd love to win every game, but looking at it in the big picture, that's why I felt it. Just go play the game. When it was obvious you were going to be forced to go play the game, get through it. Fingers crossed that you don't have too many injuries. Again, you hope the Jimmy Smith injury is not over the top serious, but a groin is tricky, especially for a defensive back with the change of direction. But you're now through it. You're hoping, the league seems so adamant that they're through the transmission, although the Geno Stone positive test certainly asks the question of why the heck, if he was someone that was expected to test positive, why was he going through the walkthroughs the last couple of days? So you pray that they truly were distancing the way they say they were. You get through it. Things start to stabilize. You start to get more guys back. And maybe next week it'll still be choppy because I think you won't have Judon, Mark Andrews, and I think Snead would still be inside 10 days for them. But you'll get just about everyone else back. And you can start feeling like you can get back to football again, because this week was, for these guys, and Robert Griffin talked about this, a couple other players talked about this. I would say it would take a hell of a lot of fortitude to really truly be putting in the mental effort from the football standpoint, considering everything that happened this week and concerns about your teammates, concerns about family members, and again, not trying to belittle that, considering what that means in relation to football. I mean, it's their livelihood, but it's not their life. So you hope now, getting through this, and no more talk about rescheduling this game, bumping it back once, twice, 3 times. And now you get on the other side of this, guys start to come back, and you can kind of recalibrate here, and you have a very advantageous schedule to do it. But I think if they had gone out there on Wednesday and just laid down like it looked like it had a chance to, when you consider how they turned the ball over twice so early in the game, and you're just thinking, boy, this is just going to be a miserable endeavor. I mean, it was ugly. It was ugly as hell for both teams, but they competed, they got through it, they battled, and now you're hoping you can start inching towards normalcy in the context of a 2020 season, not normalcy because we know this isn't like any other season, but it's still sitting right there for them. And look, they're not Super Bowl favorites or anything close to that at this point, but the Ravens in 2012 in early December weren't really that either. So you hope you get everyone back, and you're hoping you can get some things figured out on your offense, which was something we talked about before this all started. That's going to be the big key. What does Lamar look like? What does this offensive line look like? Can they incorporate Dez Bryant a little bit more? Can they get more out of their passing game? Does the 70-yard touchdown from Trace McSorley to Hollywood Brown get him going a little bit? Because we know how much that's been a struggle for him ever since the infamous tweet after the Pittsburgh game. These are the questions that are ongoing, and we didn't find out any answers about them on Wednesday, of course, but at the very least, the fight that they did show lends some hope that that they're not just going to lay down here over the final month, because they shouldn't, because you look at the schedule, it's sitting right there for them to get in. And then once you're in January, as we always know, and that's kind of how this organization's profiled when it's won Super Bowls in the past, you get in and you let the chips fall, and you hope you get hot at the right time.
Stories of Goodell and secrecy and protocol and all of that shall be held for the next segment. Luke Jones joining us here. He will not be in Owings Mills. None of us are ever in Owings. I'm so used to saying that over the course of the last decade or so. But you can find us both at BaltimorePositive.com. We are eating dark ice cream. The box comes to you, the 8-pack delivered to your door, $15.70 off in the $56 deal. The code is Baltimore Positive. You can send me an email. Go to the website. It is very, it's so easy to do. Don Moeller did it and just clicked and did it on his own. Don's here all week. We got great guests on Baltimore Positive. We're slogging through. Mark Messina has written a beautiful book about girls and kids and neat stuff. So he's going to be coming on. He's the world's biggest Dallas Cowboys fan. So there'll be a little bit of that. I'm doing a Cowboys podcast with Hall of Famer Shereen Williams and Hall of Famer Goose Goslin down in Dallas this week as the Cowboys come marching in. All right. That's at BaltimorePositive.com finds me. Luke at WNST.net finds him. Together, we merge WNST.net, AM 1570, Taos and Baltimore, and the new Baltimore Positive.